My guest today is Kathryn Ferguson, an Emmy nominated director of the multi award winning feature doc Nothing Compares about the artist Sinéad O'Connor. Now, the project was a natural extension of Kathryn's ongoing interest in music and power. And her current award winning short, Nostalgie, is about a faded English 1980s pop star who is unexpectedly invited to perform in Northern Ireland, pulling him out of musical retirement and into a moral dilemma tied to the unintended legacy of his work. What begins as an exercise in nostalgia turns into a reckoning when he discovers his music has been repurposed in ways that contradict its original intent. Now, Nostalgie is one of the select number of Film 4 backed shorts to receive BAFTA longlisting recognition this year, as well as being nominated for the IFTA, further cementing Kathryn Ferguson's transition into fiction filmmaking alongside her amazing documentary work. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome award winning filmmaker Kathryn Ferguson and her award winning short, Nostalgie, to the show. Welcome, Kathryn.
Thank you so much for having me. Lovely to be here.
Well, it's great. I love this film. Wow, so different, and you really bring something up within the content of this film. But how did you come to direct Nostalgie?
Well, it's a slightly long winded story, but it was very much linked to the tail end of Nothing Compares. So, Nothing Compares launched at Sundance in 2022. And one of the most surprising things that happened quite quickly after that was that drama producers reached out to me after Nothing Compares. And I was slightly flummoxed by this as I couldn't make the connection. For me, Nothing Compares had taken up so much of my life and my psyche and every part of me. I hadn't thought past it. So suddenly I was getting calls from drama producers asking if I'd considered drama. And of course, I hadn't, as I'm saying, I hadn't considered anything past Nothing Compares. But this is where it all kind of began because it was one of these producers, English drama producer called Kath Matic, reached out saying, have you thought of drama and have you read the work of Belfast, fellow Belfastian, I'm from Belfast, writer Wendy Erskine? She has a new book of short stories out and I think you should have a read. So this was where it all really started to come together. I was sent a manuscript of Wendy's book of 12 short stories. And I think it was when I was touring Nothing Compares. I was one of these long flights going somewhere, and I read all of the stories on the plane. And it was nostalgia that really just instantly jumped out at me. And I think nostalgia in particular, because I mean, Wendy writes so cinematically anyway, but nostalgia, I think because it had come off the back of working with Sinead and making Nothing Compares and thinking about what happens to an artist's work once it's released in the world and they lose all autonomy over their art or their work, it just felt incredibly relevant to what had been whooshing around my head with regards to Sinead. So nostalgia was a very instant, yeah, it was a very instant hit for me in that book of short stories.
You know, for those who aren't familiar with the history of Northern Ireland, who were the Troubles? And weren't they pretty much like the IRA, the NLA, the other groups from the 1960s to the late 1990s?
Yes, so the Troubles was a period of time that the trouble, was happening in the north, and basically we had multiple paramilitary groups on both sides. We had the IRA and the various Republican groups, and then we had the loyalist groups like the UDA and UFF. So there were these two warring factions and paramilitary groups in the north.
Well, this film has a modern day overtone with the political campaigns that use pop artist songs as their anthems. And I can see why the artists demand the politicians to stop. Your film shows the deep emotional damage it did to the character of Drew Lord Haig when he learned that his song was being used as a rally cry by the paramilitaries. So you really bring a story that a lot of us may have not even realized actually exists, and it's right there in front of us in the media.
Absolutely, and it's certainly a very real story, and not our particular one, but this idea of artists losing control of their work. And certainly, Sinead had her work co-opted and used in rallies, much against her will, multiple times. And artists like Bruce Springsteen and Reagan, and even the story that the original short story was based on is one of the paramilitary groups in Northern Ireland had used Tina Turner's Simply the Best as their anthem for 30 years, to which she had sent a cease and desist and got nowhere, because the reality is, once the work's out there, you can't stop it being used in the wrong hands.
Yeah, that's a big problem. And there's, the scene in your film when Lord Haig was sitting outside after singing and he was asked to sing the Nostalgie song again. The look on his face, he was reluctant. Well, once he learned what why they were wanting to hear that song again, he became reluctant. His presence there changed from being a former pop star to being, well, an appeared supporter of their past cause. And it became an instant conflict that he didn't see coming. And I found that the whole scene was so powerful. Uh, and even for him, it was more than just singing the song again. Him singing it again felt like he condoned the past attack on the pub. That created the dilemma, correct?
Absolutely, and he's accidentally complicit. And I guess this is a story about moral relativism as well. You know, this idea of not of choosing not to look, or choosing to look the other way and not engage in the in particular politics. And I think what was I think is so beautiful about the original story, Wendy Erskine's original story, it's the nostalgia of both these groups. We've got our 1986 English one hit wonder pop star desperately trying to reclaim this most potent moment in his life, 1986, when life for him was in full tilt. And then we have our men, our paramilitary groups, who are also trying to reclaim this moment for them where they felt most vital and they were fighting a cause that they believed in. And it's a sad mirroring in the film of these two stories, and they're both trying to reclaim something that's long gone with
Well,
tragic consequences.
very much so. And I kept rewatching the scene when he stepped up to the mic to sing the song a second time. The cinematography, the editing, I mean, your subtle visuals were very powerful when Lord Haig sang the song a second time because I went back to watch it because mixing the current joy from the former paramilitary crowd with the past massacre that they created in the past was a very powerful visual.
Yeah, and we weren't sure how much to include or not include with the second singing of the song. But I guess I wanted to be able to show the kind of edges of it without it being a really explicit scene, and very sadly it was a very common occurrence during particularly the 1970s in Northern Ireland, where a lot of innocent people were shot and killed sitting in bars or in restaurants. And it was something that was it would have, I was born in the 80s in Belfast, and the visuals that you would have seen in the local newspapers, I mean, this is what we saw a lot of the time. There was a lot of these kind of senseless killings, and it was definitely a conundrum on how much to bring in and how much to leave out, or how much to leave unsaid. But I'm hoping we included just enough for it to be visceral enough to kind of get a real sense of these, like the fractured memories that are left behind, with this legacy of the Troubles hanging over
Yeah,
the town.
I loved it because it was so subtle, but those shots were basically flashbacks of Drew trying to visualize what had happened in that pub. And the attack in the pub was actually a revenge attack, wasn't it?
It was, but I think as Sean Cairns, the amazing actor that plays the barman that reveals everything to Drew outside, says it was tit for tat. That's how it was. It was terrible, but that's just how it was, and this is how the Troubles played out. And it was revenge attacks or senseless murders of innocent people. It was both, and I think it was really trying to show on both sides of the Troubles. Obviously, this was a very recurring theme that happened often, and even within my own family, you know, my mother's cousin was killed in this way in the early 70s in a bar in Belfast, just working in a bar. So it really resonated deeply, thinking about who this has happened to, and what the kind of aftershocks of that have been on many families in the north of Ireland.
Yeah, it became an eye for an eye, and even the bar owner was trying to justify to Drew the actions. And and when I saw the bar owner trying to justify it, I kept thinking, and then I was looking at all the paramilitary guys in the bar, and you know, war is just that. You have people who are so, their belief system runs so deep that they
Yeah,
believe that they're the ones that are right.
of course, absolutely. And, you know, I think it was fascinating too, because this is about a song and an anthem. You know, I love the line as well with the barman again. Am I allowed to swear on this? It's a line from the film. But he said, you know, basically these guys had come in from their adrenaline filled murderous spree. And they'd come in and like just, it had been in this old jukebox that had been in this bar in 1986. And they were just trying to, I guess, drown out the noise and their own adrenaline, and were just finding a song. It didn't matter which song, it didn't matter if it was his song or any song, they needed a song. And because it was that song, it then goes on to become their anthem. Much to Drew's horror, you know, it didn't matter which song it was, they just needed a song and it happened to be his. It's just
Yeah,
very bad.
I yeah, and but I loved the ending scene.
Oh,
The money he was paid to sing became blood money to him. And I love the way you created the scene because he tried to spend it all at the casino at the airport to get rid of it. But then so I kept replaying the ending, that whole, when he got up and walked to one of the slot machines. I kept playing that scene over and over again. But you placed Drew in a juxtaposition with his song and the money. No matter how hard he tried, he can't change history and that he is now a part of. And I think him trying to get rid of the money, but it was his winning at the slot machine wasn't actually winning. In this case, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. But in this case, he couldn't, as there was no way out.
no, no, and that was the key thing. It was that he just kept winning. He couldn't, you know, he couldn't rid himself of this situation. And I think his apathy as well. You know, I think what's so fascinating with Drew as a character is that instead of spending his journey to Belfast, maybe Googling or researching where he was going and who he was going to be performing for, he goes on his own nostalgia trip, enjoys the Guinness on the boat, and he enjoys chatting to a young musician, female musician, on the boat instead of spending that precious time doing a bit more research. So I think it's a reckoning.
He may have should have done some research a couple of weeks beforehand before
Exactly.
he went there. And I mean, that's what Google is for, I think. So should have spent some time doing that. But yeah, you know, because even when he was traveling to Northern Ireland, his thoughts were about the past. You know, when he was a
Absolutely.
pop star, and you know, I think he found it a little bit intriguing, and it was kind of a feel good moment for him to share the songs. But it was kind of funny and weird at the same time when the first two songs he sang, nobody cared. They waited for that one song, which was actually a B-side song. And you know, we know that in music history, there are some songs out there that became monster hits because they ended up on the B-side.
This is very true. This is very true. Absolutely. But that's the whole point, because he thinks he's been brought over to play his number one hits and to go down that memory and the accolades from that, you know, just for that all to be refreshed in his own memory. And as you said, yes, he plays this number one hit, and no one bats an eyelid. Worse than that, they talk over him, drink over him, they completely ignore him to the point where he wants to grind to swallow him whole. And I think just as he's about to give up and try and leave, he plays this final song, and that is the anthem, and it's so potent to them because of this awful legacy attached to it. So it's yeah, it's a real rug pull, I think, when you get to that point, because you almost feel sorry for him, and then we see what we see. But no, it was very interesting. Just even watching the whole thing take place, and we had to write the songs from scratch. We had to create two 1986 bangers. Like they had to be earworms, they had to be believable. As particularly the first song that he sings, it needs to be believable that it could have been a 1986 number one hit. So that was a wild jaunt trying to do that.
Well, I read that where the songs were original, and I really love the fact that they still had that 1980s flavor and sound to them. And Aiden, did he sing all of the songs himself?
He did. So they were written by an extraordinary musician, Dan Smith, from the band Bastille, and this he is moving into film composition, and he and I started working together on this, and he wrote the songs from scratch, which was amazing. And on the back of a tour bus, whilst he was touring with Bastille, he was writing these 1986 hits, and then Aidan learned them and performed them. And then we ended up working with Sinead O'Connor's producer, John Reynolds, to actually record the 1986 hits, but with Aidan singing. So then we had two versions. We had the recordings, and then we had the live version that we recorded during the actual shoot itself. And then in the film, it features both. So there's a lot of Aidan singing live, and then when it tips into his nostalgia and into the young version of himself for a few seconds, that's the recording, which is meant to be the 1986 actual recording.
It's incredible editing, but wow, stepping out that far for a short film to create your own songs and own music score. I'm just in awe of that. Now, how did you come to cast the film? Because I understand much of the crowd was from Northern Ireland, but you have top actors such as Aidan Gillen from the Game of Thrones, and I recognize Seamus O'Hara right off the bat because I saw him in Irish Goodbye. And then you also had Jessica Reynolds and Michael Smiley in this film.
We did. No, the casting was extraordinary. I think once we had everything ready to go and the script and the funding, because it all took a good couple of years for it to come together. And when it was finally ready, we worked with Shaheen Baig, the incredible casting director in London, and she cast Aidan, and that was such a coup. And Aidan, to me, was exactly who was right for Drew Lord Haig. I'd actually seen him perform. I think he'd performed a little bit of live music. His partner's a singer, and I'd watched them sing, and he just had that kind of loose 80s. I'm not 80s at all, but just that could have been a rock star aesthetic about him anyway. And I thought, I can really see him in this. This is great. So we were able to get Aidan. And then we worked with a brilliant Belfast casting agent, Mary Ellen O'Hara, Seamus's wife, who ended up casting all of the Northern Irish cast, including Jessica, Michael Smiley, and Seamus, who came in to do a cameo, which was amazing. And it was extraordinary. And for me, I am from Belfast, but I've lived in England for a couple of decades now. So, and I'd never actually shot properly in Belfast, in my hometown. So this was my first chance to get to go home, tell a story about my home, and then work with this incredible cast and crew, predominantly from Belfast.
Wow, wow. That's the casting is absolutely perfect for this film because when I saw Aiden, I looked at him and I'm thinking, okay, it's modern day. He has the look of a former pop star. Because when I go back and I look at all the pop stars, especially here, we called it the 1980s British invasion, and there were so many acts. And
Yeah.
and now when you see them and those that are still performing, they have that look. And Aiden has that perfect look. And I don't think you could have picked anybody better.
No, he was extraordinary. It was so incredible to get to work with him. He just went all in and was completely game. And even with the singing, which I'm sure was tricky enough, having to put yourself out there and learn these songs and perform them and all of it. I mean, he just went all in and, was extremely generous with his time. It was a short and, we were doing it on a shoestring trying to get this thing made. And, yeah, and for me, working with actors for the first time, it was extraordinary getting to work with such seasoned, incredible talent. I felt like, yeah, I had to pinch myself a few times whilst on set. I was like, how am I here? This is
Well,
ridiculous.
well, you bring up an important point here. For you, what was the biggest challenge of going from a very well-known, famous documentary into doing fictional filmmaking and dealing with actors?
Goodness, it was just, I think my biggest concern was how to be able to communicate very clearly with the actors. I'm not film school trained. I haven't had any prior experience of it at all. All I knew is that I had this amazing story and then an amazing adaptation by Stacey Gregg, the scriptwriter, and it was how to be able to communicate. But I genuinely think because I was working with such excellent talent, they were very generous and patient, and we were able to have very open dialogue about what each character needed to bring and how to achieve it. So and also, like, even we had Robbie Ryan shoot the film, an amazing cinematographer. I felt very held, and it then meant, instead of me, I suppose, all of the anxiety that I would have naturally felt about that transition, I just felt like I was surrounded by such extraordinary people who were there because they wanted to be, and they were being very generous. Everything just kind of flowed. It felt very organic, and I actually found it exhilarating. I really, really loved the shoot. I was nervous, but it was just making sure with the performances, making sure that we could get to, just to get the absolute best in a very short four-day period. So we didn't have, there was no time to burn, money to burn, or any extra day. So we had to nail it quite fast. Oh, and we shot in film. So,
You shot this in film.
yeah, we did. With Robbie. Robbie, of course, at the helm. Robbie shoots everything in film. So again, I couldn't have been in safer hands, but it adds to the excitement.
It, well, yeah, because I love the fact when filmmakers choose film, even if it's their first time, because it keeps everything very, very focused on set.
Yeah,
And the actors know there's not going to be a lot of takes.
no, absolutely. Yeah, no, we moved pretty fast. We really did. We didn't have long days. We had to move fast, and
Yeah.
it just kept the energy up of the shoot, I guess. And I think that helped with there was a slightly manic energy over the 4 days, but I think that only helped add to the dramatic action
And
in
you
the
don't
film.
really know what you're filming until it comes back to you.
No, not at all. No, no. A lovely big surprise.
I think I saw this morning there were 8, possibly 10 films that were Oscar nominated shot on film. So
Oh,
I'm so happy that the art of real film, I'm sure Kodak is elated that people still want to use film. And every year I see anywhere from 8 millimeter to 16 to 35. But
yeah,
I am so glad you told me that because I just love the use of real film.
me
And
too.
how did you direct Aiden in the areas of scenes? Because I noticed something when he was outside and then he had learned why they were so excited of singing Nostalgie. I saw his look on his face when he was standing on stage, and then also the emotional turmoil he was going through at the slot machine. How did you direct him and prepare him for the mindset of that character in those scenes?
We just talked a lot. We did a lot of talking. As I said, he was very generous and he came up to Belfast a good few days before the shoot. And we just had lots of meetings and talked it through and talked about the violence of it all and the violence of the emotion of it all and how big or small or how to portray this, and we had different takes where it was, I think it was a real balance, particularly in the edits and how to show that. you know um I love his elation after the. I love that scene where he's hopping around having a cigarette after the first Nostalgie, and that joy, and then the utter crushing of the reality when he's told. But I mean, Aidan brought so much of this, but we talked and talked and talked about it, and he got it. I mean, Aidan's Irish, so he grew up during the Troubles. He grew up in the South, but he very much grew up in the Ireland that this was all happening in. So it was certainly not something that he had to try and imagine. He knows the story very, very well. And that's what made it so special, was working with this huge Irish cast and team. We all know it. It's our history.
That's it. That's it. Well, how does it feel to be BAFTA longlisted? And I know the nominations are coming up, and you were just nominated for the IFTA?
We were, yeah, we were. I mean, it feels slightly outrageous, to be honest. It really does. The film only came out at London Film Festival in October, so we just didn't. Of course, you submit to these things, but we truthfully didn't expect any of this. We just thought if we can get it out and it has a nice festival run and see where it goes, that's what we want to do. So, BAFTA was quite startling, actually. But so, I mean, amazing. The whole team, everybody that put all of their time and effort into this. It was a real passion project for everybody. I mean, everybody's elated. And IFTA, amazing. I mean, it's, to be like recognized and honored by our own, most important, I think, actually. So it's we're all really looking forward to that, which is happening at the end of February. Yes, that award ceremony. So yeah, thrilled. And then it's playing in a lot of festivals in the next few months too, including Dublin Film Festival next month. So just really hope now. I think what would be great with the award side of things, if that helps propel its festival life and it travels and we get to share it as much as we can, would be the dream.
I just love Irish short films. I love talking to Irish filmmakers. There's just something so special, something so different in the storytelling because I fell in love with An Irish Goodbye. I loved Clodagh. I've seen
Oh,
films like Calf and others, and there's just something special about the Irish. And
oh,
I've been to Ireland, so maybe I'm showing a little bit favoritism, but yes, I just love the filmmaking over there. And wow, Nostalgie is a very powerful film.
thank you. And just on that, I mean, I think they've called it the green wave at the minute with Irish filmmaking, because there's such a wave of work that's coming out of the country, which is fascinating. There's real cultural cachet, I think, with young artists, filmmakers, musicians, writers. There just seems to be a huge surge of creativity right now, and people, like all of my contemporaries, everybody wants to share our stories, and it's amazing that they're being that they're resonating across the world. We're delighted about that, so long may it last.
I think it will, and I can't wait to see what else comes from Ireland and Northern Ireland. Such great filmmaking there. And ladies and gentlemen, Nostalgie was written by Stacey Gregg and based on a short story by Wendy Erskine. Now, Nostalgie explores the intersection of personal vanity, collective memory, and the political afterlife of pop culture. Now, the lead character, Drew Lord Haig, a former 80s one-hit wonder, turned IT entrepreneur, is stunned when a Belfast battalion invites him to perform at their, 100th celebration. Flattered and intrigued, Drew accepts, hoping to relive his glory days and recapture his youth, launching into his hit single, and the audience appears unmoved. But on the opening bars of his long forgotten B side, Nostalgie de la Boe, something unexpected happens. The crowd erupts. Word for word, they sing with fervor, evaluating the moment into something transcendent. Drew is overwhelmed until afterwards he learns the truth. The battalion had adopted a song during the Troubles, using it as a rallying cry for covert, brutal operations. Now, what he once saw as artistic rebellion had become a weapon, a soundtrack to bloodshed. Reeling, Drew returns home, the weight of complicity pressing down. He began as nostalgic curiosity ends in moral reckoning. His music, once his escape, now binds him to a history he never meant to write. But this film intrigued me because with thousands of storylines being put on film each year, I found Nostalgie a film that brings a whole new perspective to storytelling. I fully understand why recording artists are angry of having their music played during political campaigns that they are not supporting. And many are guilty by association, and we can go into cancel culture even a little bit more on that topic. But, using their music without their permission, technically that should be a no-no. It even reminds me of the day when Charles Manson was associated with the Beatles song Helter Skelter. Well, Kathryn Ferguson raises the bar with incredible storytelling and nostalgia, and I can see why it has been BAFTA longlisted and IFTA nominated. And Kathryn, thank you so much for sharing this powerful, intriguing, and emotional dilemma of a short film.
Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed that.
You're very, very welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, we have so many campaign award shows coming up. So keep your eye on Nostalgie. And also, too, it will be appearing in more film festivals. So when you get a chance, make sure that if you're at the film festival where Nostalgie is showing, be in the seat in the theater and watch an incredible film and a story come to life. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can watch or listen to all of the Bond on Cinema interviews at bondoncinema.com. Check out our Prime show, our YouTube channel, Spotify, iTunes, and more. And remember, you're either going to see me at the movies or from the red carpet.